Good morning, dear all. Today we'll try to complete this lesson that is Silk Road. We did yesterday and the day before yesterday the journey that started with bumpier and sharp routes and all. And finally, we have come to know that he is moving on the Silk Road and his purpose is to do the Kora and reach Mansarovar and Mount Kailash. And he's discussing, the narrator is telling us how he faced all these things, what were the local beauties, and how the local people behaved, what was the situation there, climate, condition, changes in the weather, and so many other things. So, let me share the lesson. Yes. We have done this beginning part and we were somewhere in the middle of the lesson. Yes, we were here. When he was around 5,515 meters high, where just before that he has experienced the brackish lakes, the salty lakes, right? So, and his driver was with him. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck. So Sitan and I bade him farewell. And after bidding him farewell, he reached the place of Hor. Hor was a grim, miserable place. There was no vegetation. Maybe he was tired also. That's why he could not enjoy now this place, which was little less with less vegetation, less number of people outside. It was unfortunate given that town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, which was on the shore of this beautiful place, but yet it was with less. And we discussed that most venerated stretch of water, ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology points, pinpoints Mansarovar as the source of four great Indian rivers. We discussed these things yesterday. And but I had to wait. Satan told me to go and drink some tea in Horse Only Cafe, which, like all the other buildings in town, was constructed from badly painted concrete and had three broken windows. The only place to have a cup of coffee, right? The good view of the lake through one of them helped to compensate for the drought. The lessening of people, the less number of people and the vegetation and that situation which was little grim. Now this view of the lake compensated little bit. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around on my table with a filthy rag. A cloth that he used was very dirty before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. Half an hour later, Satan relieved me from my solitary confinement and we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westwards out of town towards Mount Kailash. Another bit of journey we covered, small journey you can say more. My experience in all came as a stark contrast to accounts I had read of earlier travelers' first encounters with the Lake Mansarovar. Whatever I have read about Mansarovar, the first view of the Mansarovar, right? And I've read about this place in books and travelogues. It was little different. Ekai Kwagachi, a Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the sanctity of the lake that he burst into tears. I've read this experience of this Japanese monk who had reached Mansarovar and he cried there when he saw sanctity, purity of the lake. A couple of years later, the hallowed waters had a similar effect on Sven Hedden, a Swede who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. So I have read about these experiences of these travelers. It was dark by the time we finally left again, and after, yes, 10:30 p.m. we drew up outside a guest house in Darjeeling for what turned out to be another troubled night. Kicking around in the open air rubbish dump that passed for the town of Fort had set off my cold once more. come long way. So I got cold, and the night was quite terrible for me. And though if truth be told, it had never quite disappeared with my mobility. One of my nostrils was blocked again, and as I lay down to sleep, I wasn't convinced that the other would provide me with sufficient oxygen. My watch told me I was at 4,760 meters high. It wasn't much higher than Rahul. And then I had been gasping for oxygen several times every night. So he felt, sickness, illness, and he felt that he is in trouble. He couldn't sleep. I had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disturbances by now, but still, they still scared me. As a traveler, as an adventurer, I have suffered these nocturnal means nightly disturbances. Night. So whenever I used to go on these adventures, these problems were very common. That you are unable to sleep, you have traveled a lot, you are tired, and the sleep was it was restless. So tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. After a while, I switched to single nostril power, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen, but just as I was drifting off, I woke up abruptly. Something was wrong. My chest felt strangely heavy, and I sat up. A movement that cleared my nasal passages almost instantly relieved the feeling in my chest. Curious, I thought. Now I became curious, I thought. I lay down and tried again, same result. I was not able to breathe comfortably. I was on point of disappearing into the land of God when something told me not to. I was thinking as if I've done something when I'm told not to do, and I've done that same thing again and again. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this was not the same as on previous occasions. Previously also I had suffered from such things whenever I used to travel and whenever I used to be on thrilling expeditions and experiences. But this time I wasn't gasping for breath. I was simply not allowed to go to sleep. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. And the moment I was sitting, I was feeling comfortable. The moment I was lying down, I couldn't breathe. So I could breathe freely and my chest felt fine after sitting. But as soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled with my chest was and odd. I was feeling very odd. I tried propping myself upright against the wall. And he's trying to comfort himself. And it is his first night there. But now I couldn't manage to relax enough to drop. I couldn't put my finger on the reason. But I was afraid to go to sleep. Now I was afraid to go to sleep. He thought that he would die. So if he sleep, he'll die. A little voice inside me was saying that if I did, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. And he stayed awake all night. Right? Again, that nocturnal being, those who keep awake at night. So he also stayed. And Siddhant he took me to the Darchan Medical College the following morning. The medical college at Darchan was new and looked like a monastery from the outside with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. We found the consulting room, which was dark and cold and occupied by a Tibetan doctor who wore none of the paraphernalia. Now, doctors' stethoscope and other things that the doctors wear. The doctor whom I met was wearing nothing of that sort as our doctors they wear. So, that I had been expecting. No white coat. He looked like any other Tibetan with a thick pullover and a woolly hat. When I explained my sleepless symptoms and my sudden aversion to lying down, that aversion means he did not want at that time to sleep. Last night, the previous night, he suffered that he did not want to sleep. So he shot me a few questions while feeling the veins of my wrist. It is a cold, he said finally to Satan, because the language was different. Satan was doing this work of translating and communicating a cold and the effects of altitude. Now the doctor said, because you are on height, so this is the little effect of that. I'll give you something for it. I asked him if he thought I would recover enough to be able to do the Torah. Oh yes, he said, you'll be fine. The narrator asked the doctor, the Tibetan doctor, and whether he would be able to do this for what he has come, right? So, will he be able to complete Quora? He said, yes, you will be fine. I walked out of the medical college, clutching a brown envelope, stuffed with 15 screws of paper. And he found some packet in that. The medicines were there, and I had a 5-day course of Tibetan medicine, which I started right away. I opened an after breakfast package and found it contained a brown powder, minute details he has given. And this way, the writers, the authors, the narrators, they take us into the world that they had experienced. These small details, that brown small packets of some powdery medicine, right? And whenever I took the next dose, it was obviously identifiable. Like the previous one, both contained small spherical brown pellets. They looked suspiciously like sheep dung, but of course, I took them. The medicines were balls, small balls and all. But I took them. They looked suspiciously like sheep dung, but of course I took them because I have to make myself well. That night after my first full day's course, I slept very soundly. Medicines did work nicely like a log, not a dead man. I slept nicely like a log, not like a dead man. And once he saw that I was going to live, Satan left me. Now Satan left to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it didn't really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be bad for business if you died. Right? So he also said maybe good wishes, pleasantries, and to continue the Quora, and he left. Now the place where he has come was not miserable as it was yesterday. Maybe because he was not well, maybe he was, troubled, so he couldn't enjoy. Now he was very relaxed and he had a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse. Every tourist place is not all these things, right? Shall I continue? Have you understood this much, dear students? Very good. Very good. Now, it was still dusty and partially derelict and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse, but the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas, commanded by a huge snow-capped mountain, Gurla Mandana, with just a wisp of cloud suspended over its summit on the top. The town had a couple of rudimentary general stores that give you the basic things, selling Chinese cigarette soap and other basic provisions, so rudimentary, right? And now, basic things like soaps and other provisions, as well as the usual strings of prayer flags. In front of one, men gathered in the afternoon for a game of pool. The battered table, wobbly table was there, looking supremely incongruous in the open air. It does not or did not match with the beautiful ambience, that wobbly table, right? Incongruous, not at all congruent with the ambience and the environment. Open air, while nearby women washed their long hair in the icy water of a narrow stream that babbled down past my guest house. Babble is a sound word. Babbling of water he could hear. When the women washed their hair in that stream, icy stream, now he felt relaxed, and unhurried. But for me, it came with a significant drawback. There were no pilgrims. There were no people like me who had come for Quora. I was the only one. I had been told that at the height of the pilgrimage season, the town was bustling with visitors. He was told by the people there where he stayed that the town is a bit full of hustle and bustle when there is the season of people coming to do their Quora and this activity. I was too early. I came little early, right? So we have finally come on the conclusion of the lesson. I had been told that this was not the season. Many brought their own accommodation, enlarging the settlement around its edges as they set up their tents, which spilled down on the plain. I had timed my arrival for the beginning of the season, but it seemed I was too early. I had timed my schedule in the when the season begins, so less people were there. One afternoon, I sat pondering my options over a glass of tea in Darchandoni Cafe. After a little consideration, I concluded they were severely limited. Clearly, I hadn't made much progress with my self-help programming on positive thinking. I concluded they were severely limited. Less people. In my defense, I hadn't been easy with all my sleeping difficulties. But however I looked at it, I could only wait. Now, the pilgrimage trail was well trodden, but I didn't fancy doing it alone. Now the trails were ready and the path was ready. But how could I do this all alone in isolation? Right? The Kora was seasonal because parts of the route were liable to blockage by snow. So I had no idea whether or not the snow had cleared. But I wasn't encouraged by the chunks of dirty ice that still clung to the banks of Darchan's brook. And I was not interested. First of all, he was not interested in going alone. Secondly, he was not attracted. That loneliness was suppressing him. Since Satan had left, I hadn't come across anyone in Darchan with enough English to answer even the most basic questions. He was even that communication problem he was facing. They might be speaking Tibetan or other languages, but he used to speak English, and the driver was there to help until that is I met Norbu. He met now one person. The cafe was small, dark, and cavernous with a long metal stove that ran down the middle. Right now, dear children, you can keep pencil in your hand and you can underline the words that we are dealing, babbled, in congress, vast, cavernous, vast, with a long metal stove, dark and vast, right? Read. So you can underline all these words that we have shared, right? Rudimentary, summit. If you know, wonderful, keep your pencil in your hand and you can, right? So now, with a long metal stove that ran down the middle, the walls and the ceilings were wreathed sheets of multicolored plastic of the stripped variety, broad blue, red, and white, that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags sold over China. Now he's describing, I met Norbu, there was a cafe where the ceilings were wreathed, covered in sheets, right? So there was a cafe where he met him, and multicolored ceilings and walls, and blue, red, and white that is made into stout, voluminous shopping bags sold all over China and in made other countries of Asia as well as Europe. As such, plastic must rate as one of China's most successful exports along the Silk Road today. So he had shared that current situation also, that where that plastic is made and how it is sold and what all it is used for. The cafe had a single window beside which I had taken up position so that I could see the pages of my notebook. I had also brought a novel with me to help pass the time. Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite to me at my rickety table. Again, that wobbly tables were there, moving, shaking. You English? He inquired after he had ordered tea. I told him I was, and was struck up a conversation. I didn't think he was from those parts because he was wearing a windcheater and metal rimmed spectacles of a Western style. He was Tibetan, he told me, but worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. I assured he was on some sort of field work. Yes and no, he said. I have come to do the Kora. So finally, he has got a companion also. He has got a companion who will do with him. My heart jumped. Norbu had been writing academic papers about the Kailash Kora. Why he had come? He was a researcher. He was in Institute of Ethnic Literature, where he has come to do Quora and write something as an academic research paper or literature paper for others to read and follow and make use of it. So, and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature. He was writing about the Kailash Quora and its importance in various works of Buddhist literature for many years. He told me, but he never actually done it himself. When the time came for me to tell him what brought me to Darchan, his eyes lit up. We could be a team, he said excitedly. Two academics who have escaped from library, two people of same nature, same work, those who have escaped from their book world into the real beautiful world. The book world, the library world, where they have read about all these places and have been attracted, captivated by the beauty, by experiences of the others. Those who have cried on the banks of these places and rivers and all, and these particular special beautiful places on these heights, perhaps my positive thinking strategy was working after all. My initial relief at meeting Norbu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill-equipped as I was for the pilgrimage. We all were both were ill-equipped. That means they were not resourceful. Much of the things they did not have. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be. Very high up, he kept reminding me, so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really practicing Buddhist. It transpired, but he had enthusiasm and he was, of course, typical. I could feel that he's saying he's following Buddhism and all, but I could feel that he actually was not. And he was complaining and all the time saying, I won't be able to go, and like that. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, on reflection, I decided that perhaps Norbu would turn out to be the ideal companion. He suggested we hire some yaks to carry our luggage, which I interpreted as a good sign, and he had no intention of prostrating himself all round the mountain. Now he had no intention to blame himself, right? Not possible, he cried, collapsing across the table in a hysterical laughter. And he said, not possible, that I stopped myself, blaming myself and all. And he laughed, and it wasn't his style, and anyway, his tongue was too big. So it ended with a funny statement that the companion whom I interacted was the one with whom I could go and complete my expedition or the tour or the experience that I wanted to enrich myself with. Dear students, we'll do the question answers in the next class, right? We'll do the question answers in the next class. So I hope you have understood the lesson. Very good. The virtual thumbs are coming. I want that please go through the lesson and read it nicely, revise it so that we can complete it with question answers.